the next edition of our roundtable series here at Amicus. Massively grateful for you all taking the time out of your day to join me today and to talk about a topic which I think is really important, and clearly all of you do too, which is, do you need a specialist or a generalist when it comes to software engineering? So we've got 5 engineering leaders with us today from the market across Denmark, so I'm going to get everyone to do a short introduction in a moment. But we've got Tobias, we've got Henrik, Rosa, Magnus, and Becca. Tobias, you're at the top of my screen. Would you mind giving us a quick introduction to yourself, who you are, and what you're all about?
Of course. Yeah, hi, my name is Tobias. I have a background in computer science, worked in Silicon Valley in various companies for a decade or so. And right now I'm the director of engineering at Utiligize. We're a 20 people startup based in Copenhagen. We empower the companies that operate the electrical grid such that they can visualize the loading on their grids today and project how it will look out to 2050. So based on this, we then do investment models to help them understand where and how to enforce the grid such that the green transition can happen and we don't end up with a unstable power supply and other various scenarios that we don't care for. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Henrik, over to you if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Henrik Redslund. I am the CTO here at Acuranger. Acuranger is a software as a service tool that does rank tracking for people in the SEO game. So large-scale data aggregation and insights. Also a computer scientist by background and been in the software game for some 20 odd years.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Rosa, you're next.
Hi, I'm Rósa Björk Einarsdóttir. I am an executive tech leader. I have a background in engineering leadership and worked in companies like SYBO, Unity, and SimCorp. I'm actually currently taking some time off because I want to explore moving into a C-level opportunity more on the business side and actually get a little bit out of engineering and be more on the business side in a mission-driven company. So that's what I'm up to. But my last position was VP of Engineering at SYBO, which is in mobile games. They make the game Subway Surfers, which is played by around 19 million people on a daily basis. So that was a lot of fun leading that engineering community.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Magnus?
Yeah, so I'm Magnus. I also have a background in the computer science, but also in social science, and I have a master in IT management as well. On top of that, I've been working as consultant, and for the last 10 years, I've been working as an engineering manager in different positions. So currently, I'm the CTO at TestaViva, which is a legal tech. It sounds a lot like we just do wills, but we actually do a lot of things. We do real estate, we do any legal documents you can think about in your private life, but also in your professional life. And that's kind of the fun day-to-day I'll do right now.
Amazing. Thank you. And last but not least, of course, we've got Becca.
Hi, I'm Becca. I currently am an engineering manager at Track Unit. They do IoT construction fleet management solutions. Before that was a manager at Lego, and before that was in the US working at a smattering of startups. I do not have a degree in tech. I have a degree in geology, actually, but have worked in the tech sector for quite a long time, doing a smattering of odd jobs, front end, back end, SRE. So I have a wealth of that, and then true engineering manager.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you everyone for going through all of that. So glad we're all kind of on the same page and know who each other are now. So we'll jump straight into the conversation, which I think, as we've all kind of agreed, is an important one to talk about, something that's always a hot topic when it comes to especially companies hiring. And that's whether they need a specialist in their team or they need a generalist. I think probably the best place to start, and it would make the most sense to cover, first of all, people's definitions of what that truly means. let's just, I guess, put it in the most basic terms. You're looking to hire an engineer into your team. How would you define whether someone is a specialist or a generalist, and what does that look like to you? It's a free for all now. Anyone can jump in.
Yes. Well, I think, I've hired a lot of people over the years, and I think it depends on, the type of the company, etc. But I mean, like, you look at your team, and if you've made a gap analysis, for example, and then do you need a specialist? Do you need somebody who is a domain expert with, many years working in the same domain, know that completely inside and out? Or are you looking for somebody who is also interested in, the surrounding areas, a bit more T-shaped maybe, somebody who wouldn't be shy to also talk about product or looking into other domains as well. So a slightly broader, broader skill base. Some people just love to know everything that there is to know in the world about .NET, while others will be like, hey, I actually want to learn something about, how to do compilers as well, or something like that. So that's at least how I think about it. Is somebody deep in their domain, or are they looking a bit more across as well?
I fully agree with you. I think like generalist would be the T-shaped person, right? They have some depth at least, and then some broad, right? But I think we have the classical like specialist is the machine learning guy. Like they are specialized. There might be generalists in that domain, but compared to the whole engineering discipline, they will be specialists. But I also think like the start of those, now we introduce the product engineers, right? The next step after the full stack engineer, where you not just do the stack from the servers to the front end, but you also do the product journey, right? And I think that's like the ultimate generalist we're introducing here, because they can take something from the idea to actually putting in production, right? I'm not saying it's a perfect thing, but I think that's the drive we're seeing, right? We used to be like back end, front end, machine learning. Maybe we have a setup. Then we introduced some DevOps. People were like back end DevOps. Then you have full stack, like front end, back end DevOps. And I think it keeps growing this discipline of specialist and generalist, but also like the general specialist will always, from my side, be the one that has one focus. Like I'll only do front end, I'll only do back end. I'm a machine learning person. I'm SRE only, or I'm like sysadmin or whatever that is. I think that's my very squarish definition of it.
Good points, Magnus. I think you're absolutely right. There are several levels to this. I think for developers, the first distinction that we look upon is whether they are front end or back end. That's first step towards a specialization, but obviously it goes much deeper than that. Second thing to consider would be if they are single language or multiple languages, single framework or multiple frameworks, and just goes deeper and deeper from there. And the ML specialist obviously is a good example these days.
Yeah, I mean, so good points, but and I think working in a startup, I think you're really looking for when you're looking for who to hire, it's like, do you have how many hats do you really need to fill here? And are you really looking for one thing to fill, which is, I think sometimes we do, but sometimes it's also like we have this non-descriptive kind of role over here, which is like, we just need the system to run. And we need someone who, whatever that is, please help do that. And not so bound by, I want to do X, Y, or Z. I think it's also very interesting when you look at the people we have here, if you give them free time, what are they choosing to work on? Like true specialists will, try to, really improve on their already, their skills basically. And whereas that they're already experts on, whereas like generalists will, pick up something new and random. Like I think you said, Rosa, it's like And I think we really need both things. And yeah, it's I think certainly in a product startup, we really need some specialists who are really good at what they do, and then we need some generalists to make all of them work together and make sure it turns out to be an actual usable product and not just a great idea.
I definitely agree with the T-shape as kind of a good generalist, but then I feel like there's a variety of types of specialists that you can have. You can have one that's a guru in Java and a very high specialist on that, but maybe is not good at any of the other languages. I find that a generalist of back end, front end that are willing to pick up different technologies and maybe also learn, having a bit of knowledge of how a system works from either side of whatever you're working on, I feel like makes a better rounded team. And once again, there's some, I guess it depends when you have a different team. If you have a generalist that maybe doesn't know Kubernetes, that could possibly potentially have some problems. But I think generally for a lot of the places that I've hired, a T-shaped generalist has fit in just fine. Most of the time I just look for people who want to learn.
Exactly. I think that's one of the key things for sure. And everyone's kind of added really good points there. I think one of the key things that I kind of took away from that was obviously, I think both Magnus and Tobias, you mentioned it, there is sometimes those people who, on the more specialist side of things, have their thing, they're very happy doing that, they don't really want to branch out from that. Is anybody here who, obviously everyone here has worked in both startups and more established companies, has anybody here had issues where somebody basically is refusing to kind of expand on what they do when you need them to? And if so, like what is your kind of response to that as a leader?
I think it's interesting because like now I guess there is a level like you could be like a specialist, but underneath there you can actually be like a generalist in the specialist, right? You could be a backender with a focus on Java and taking that journey. You might be okay with going to C#, but like if we're going to whatever Rust or Giphy or functional languages, whatever, they might not be feeling safe, right? Because like they might be a full-on specialist in the backend. They know everything about how to do the right server calls and remote procedure calls, and they've even written SOA and all those things. I think like that's usually my challenge is at the scale of my company, it's really hard to be a specialist. We're not doing anything like Google level innovations. It's very much like web development. Like it's a web application. There will be some fancy thing. A lot of the things we do is more about domain knowledge than actual being an expert in everything like computer science. It's actually going like a little up to saying, okay, we need these to have like a domain knowledge. We need to build the understanding of what is in the legal domain more than necessarily in the technical domain. And I think that's sometimes the real challenge. It's not, of course, I would probably never hire a person that would only do Java into my team because like we're not having in Java, so we would not be happy person in here. But as I think it was Becca who said, like the curiosity of these things are the most critical things, and also where I think quickly you'll see, especially in small companies, having these specialists might be there, but they're not as often as if you go to the Legos or the Googles. They'll probably have specialists. They will have someone who sits there and just does authentication and identity management. They will be an extreme expert in that. They will not care about anything else, but they will definitely be an expert in that, right? That's their domain. They might not even care about what language it is in, but I think, and that's also where it becomes a little abstract, because when you bring in the domain knowledge, you can definitely be a specialist and a generalist at once, right? Which I think is also interesting. I don't know if I really answered your questions, but yeah.
I 100% hit that when I was working at Lego. We had a SAP people on one of my teams, and they were happy just doing SAP and living in that world, and they didn't want to do anything with any application, anything with JavaScript, anything with absolutely anything outside of SAP. And they were really good just to chug along. It was fabulous, and I kind of embraced it, knowing that that was what their domain was and that was their specialty, and that was actually a very good specialty. But my other team that was a little bit more web applications was happy to actually just take on whichever type of language, whichever type of task that they needed to get out, like no problem. So it's definitely two dynamics that I had to kind of keep my hat on, depending on which team I was talking to.
Yeah, I think it also kind of depends a little bit in my experience, at least on like, are you trying to have, is it just another language you're trying to make people work with, or is it just like a completely different technology? Whereas, and it's like the dynamic of you shouldn't, well, you shouldn't work too much against the grain of the people also, because then, the output is going to be basically nothing, because either motivation or skills are just not there. So if it's just a different language or different sub-technology, probably easier. You can probably work around it. We run multiple languages simply because some people are more comfortable with one, and then we just abstract it away with that's fine. But there are other cases where which I think is maybe in the startup, if we pivoted away from what we did today, there would be some people that would be a little bit tricky to figure out what to, because, it's really a niche business. And so we couldn't make them be what they don't want to be. So I think it's a little bit of how much you got to work with the grain of people, I think. Otherwise you don't get, everyone loses basically.
That's a good point. I think most of the time it's the other way around. People, good engineers are always eager to learn new things. So most of the time it's the other problem. It's the other way around. But if you hire a specialist, and now you want them to do something completely else, you want them to pivot on their career, it's really more of a hiring problem than a engineer problem.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Henrik. I was just about to say it boils down to the hiring process that you found the gap, like you find the right person, that are solving the right types of problems. I haven't really had that problem per se. I've had people that had a specialty. Like, I want to do a functional language, I want to do OCaml, and that's what I love, and that's what I want to learn, and that's what I want to continue to grow in. And that was okay, because we had a team that was in SimCorp that was actually using that language for what they were working with. So that wasn't a problem. But if for some reason we would have to rewrite that, then we would have a retention issue, because then you can't honor the agreement that you made in the hiring process. But one thing that I do hear a lot from engineers, if you do ask them to, if it's a specialist and you ask them to branch out to something else, they are normally a little bit concerned about whether they maintain the learning. Because if they start spending a little bit too much time out of their specialty, technology moves so fast that's the biggest concern for them.
Yeah, almost like they can kind of fall behind if they kind of take themselves away from it for too long.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what they built their career on to this point, I guess. So that would make a lot of sense. I think, again, really good points raised, and it kind of brings me to one of the other areas that I wanted to cover. And I feel like everyone's touched on it to an extent, but realistically then, in a lot of ways, is it just as simple as it depends how big the company is? If there's room for specialists, then great, let's have them. And if there's not, then unfortunately everyone has to kind of chip in and, as someone said earlier, wear multiple hats. Or is there a little bit more complexity to that, do you think?
Also depends on the company. Oh, sorry, did I interrupt?
Oh, no.
Oh, all right. So I think it depends largely on the company or the product you're trying to build. If you may be in a special market where you need specialists from the get-go. If you're trying to build anything in fintech or payments, you probably on the cybersecurity specialist right from the start.
I think it's spot on, right? It's about the product, not the company, right? It's what you're building. Like I would probably never hire a lot of generalists if I did an AI product or I did fintech or I did gaming. I would probably look for someone who knows how to handle a lot of traffic before I get the generalist in, right? So I think it's all down to the product. But again, there is a lot of products out there that is just good old web applications and not necessarily extremely complicated domain, or you're not having 100 million requests per second and you need to know about distributed systems and handling high loads, right? So of course there is that, but I think it's a product problem, not a company problem. Of course it will be a company problem if you think you are in a specialist place and you need really special people to do something that is actually not specialist, because I guess then you will have a lot of people that are not happy in their position and they'll try to find something else to do.
I feel like it also could be a company problem. Like Track Unit, we have a lot of actual devices, so we need actual hardware engineers to focus on that, whereas a lot of the application and where I'm working on is definitely a web app. And so you don't have that same consideration that you do for then a device and people that actually like, hardware coding. So obviously moving those people around, you have to consider that also if there's a reorg, anything of that sort. So, trying to keep those specialists happy and actually producing something that they can do quite well at.
I think it's very much like a combination of these things, because like generally in a startup, you might need to have at least the generalist mindset, like Tobias was saying earlier. If it's fintech and you need specialists, then you want to hire that specialist with a little bit of a generalist mindset, because the person needs to know we need to take this from idea out into the market where it's actually generating some value, and they cannot just sit and spend 7-8 hours a day just doing only coding. So I think it's also a mindset thing for me.
Out of curiosity, though, could it be that you need a good architect that has that domain knowledge, and then you need somebody that can just actually sit there and grind through and get some code out for that idea?
That could be if the startup can afford it.
Fair.
True. It always comes down to money, doesn't it? That's the $1 million point.
Isn't that also a process issue, right? I guess like you can also, there's a lot of places that doesn't have an architect that does very good work, and like I think somebody also goes back to like when you were in school and you learned you basically learned a lot about being an architect. Like you do these diagrams and ship it off to India or whatever low-level engineer you can find, they'll fill in the blank and you have an application 10 years later. Like I think it's also a process. Like again, the generalist will probably not be good at building distributed systems, but they'll probably be really, really good at building a really well-functioning web application or mobile application that can do what the user expects. And the specialists will be very, very good at making a gaming engine for the mobile, which the journalist then can fill in the blanks on. So it's like, I don't know.
I definitely feel like in a startup, it's like you have an idea, some inception of an idea, and you need some expertise in flushing that idea out into how that makes the world a better place in whatever definition that is. And then you need, once that's flushed out, you kind of, at least as a startup, in order for you to probably got to be a little bit, you have the resource constraint, the money or whatever you have. So you got to figure out how to build it with the lowest number of resources, I guess is kind of what you're alluding to as well. And ultimately it's probably an optimization question of how many specialists you can afford to have versus how broad of or complex of a product your solution needs. And I think that's, at least for startups, I guess then as you get more money, you can hire more and more specialists. And, you can, for instance, we probably can't afford the world's best distributed computing architects, but that would be, an ambition to have one day. And in the meantime, we get by with people like myself or others who are, a little bit skilled in some of this, but also do various other things. To me, it's basically an optimization problem of where to put your strategic expertise, basically.
Isn't that like going back to Becca's point on the architect? Like, if you can find that specialist that can actually 10x your team, right? You probably will never find the 10x person, but you at least find a specialist that can enable a group of generalists or lesser specialists to actually do great work, right? That going back to the idea of having an architect, not necessarily an architect, but actually having a specialist that has the skill set to actually help lift the team. I think that would be like the golden goose or whatever.
One of my mentors was an absolute fabulous thinker on REST APIs, but could pick up pretty much any other language, but just had that actual deep knowledge of REST APIs and didn't really care about what language. So he was a generalist in that case, but really had a fabulous knowledge of actually architecting out the proper APIs. And so it was kind of that duality of he's a generalist in some cases, but then had that deep knowledge. So I guess it comes back to that T. And I'm curious because I've had a lot of startups in the US, in the Boulder area, where we had actually a lot of the architects were actually the founders of the startups and would drive a lot of that. So that was kind of their cheap architects, was the founders themselves. So I don't know what the situation is here, but
we're in the same boat. We have expert founders, so that's kind of where it came from. We did hire some additional focus the experts in the area of our core value proposition, and then a whole bunch of generalists, basically trying to be the glue.
Good mix.
Did we lose Jamie?
No, I'm still here. I was just going to say then, I think, again, a couple of other points that I wanted to kind of ring back to. We've talked a lot about kind of the hiring issue sometimes it can bring in. I mean, obviously, I'm a recruiter. I'm going to bring this back to hiring somehow. But like everyone here has hired specialists and generalists from what you've all said. From a hiring manager perspective, which one would you say is easier to find? And the reason I asked that, just to give you a bit of context, me personally, as a recruiter, I find it a lot easier to find specialists. And the only reason that is because it's such a defined, clear requirement in terms of what you need. And although it may be a little bit more difficult to find them, at least it's very, very obvious exactly what that is. Whereas when it's a generalist, it's quite difficult to actually define in a lot of cases. But I don't know whether everyone would agree with that or has a different viewpoint on it at all.
I would say it depends on the level.
No, go ahead. Sorry, Becca, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just suggesting it probably depends on the level that we're looking at too. So
sure.
that was my
yeah, either way, there's definitely fewer specialists. If you're looking at some niche skill set, there'll be fewer people and it'll be way easier to recognize them. It'll be easier to spot them once you find them. So I guess that would make recruiting easier in a sense.
But I think the interesting thing James said is like generalist, like how do you actually make a clear requirement for a generalist, right? Like your startup, how do you act? You need to do maybe a little of that. And if we do Rust, you probably also need to do that. We don't even know this requirement yet, but we'll come in and you'll need to probably also do that, right? So like finding that person, I can see like, because where specialists, they grow up somewhere. They're either, the companies where they have similar skill sets, so you can look up people who've been in company X, Y, Z, where like one who's jack of all trades might be like, where do you find them, right? What do you actually? They don't grow anywhere. Like so they might not like you need to put a list of requirements into your LinkedIn search and hopefully find someone who can do a little bit of both. But you don't even know if they like being that generalist role, right? So I think I don't think you can actually recruit generalists. I think what I see is you can grow them, right? You can build a generalist like from someone who has like the curiosity to go out and do things, right? You can look for the curious people, and then you might be able to grow a generalist from someone who's been taught whatever, like you're focusing on the back end, you're here, but they'll soon like, okay, I'll do a little front end now. I'll get this Kubernetes YAML working, and I'll like, but you probably grow them more than you find them.
That's a good point, Magnus. So it's difficult to test for a broad skill set. Are they really good at many things, or are they just not really good at anything? It's harder to test for. So would you test for mindset more if you're hiring for a generalist?
I don't do any code tests anymore. I don't think they'll give me anything, because either your CV shows and I'll find someone who works, or not. So I won't say cultural fit. I try to say how make them meet the team. Like that's the most important thing for me, is like meeting the product manager, meeting the team, like meeting the other parts of management, not just me, because that's actually where you get a good view. Do they match the team? Do they match the organization? And since most people do not lie on applications, they actually can do the work they say. So if you're a senior, you've probably worked a lot of years in this tech, and you probably can do what you tell. You might not be super expert in this side of it, but you might be here. But I don't know, they'll probably grow into it if you're a senior person, right? Or if you're mid-level or junior, I know you need to grow, right?
I
And everybody
love
needs
that
to grow.
you don't do tests. As a person that is one kind of a generalist in general, I always would fail those tests, mostly because I didn't have the in-depth, but I could actually learn quickly. I mean, obviously, I've gotten to the position I have been. I've been in many different large name companies. I can function, but if this person that knows something that I don't know, and I can generally function in JavaScript, not my main language, but I'll learn it for the job if I need to. I've worked in a lot of startups. You kind of do that whole switch a lot of hats, and you learn a lot of things, and you get, for better term, get shit done, and you just learn what you can. It doesn't necessarily interview well. So the people that are the generalists might not interview well, and they might not do a great job at that code test. But they could be really the best people to support. Sorry, go ahead.
Just going back to what Jamie said, I think, I can totally see that from the sourcing perspective for a recruiter, it's easier to find the specialist. But if you have identified the skill that you need in your team, and you've written a job ad that describes the generalist role well, and you get applicants for that, then I think that they are not, more difficult to find. Because then you find people out there that, get inspired by the job ad, because you're describing a variety of tasks that you expect that person to do. And you describe I expect some sort of a background within this domain and that domain, but you might also be interested in X, Y, Z. But definitely from a sourcing perspective, that can be difficult to find.
I mean, it sounds like the top of the funnel in terms of sourcing probably is the matching of the skills, and that's, if the skills are well defined, which is, like your point, Jimmy, probably easier for a specialist, and like your point, Rosa, it's doable for a generalist as well, mostly, I hope. Then, I mean, that makes the top of the funnel at least, but it's a lot, I think, for me, for us, it comes down a lot to like, can people, I mean, specialists who just knows the skills is not really valuable in itself. I mean, you got to be able to, if you can't share that specialist knowledge, if you can't apply it, then it doesn't matter. It's a little bit maybe easier to test from, in the sense that you can ask directly, what's a three-winding transformer, and the person may or may not know, and that's good. That at least shows some understanding of the topic. But if you need to be able to, function as a team. You got to be able to elevate your colleagues. You got to be able to, close tasks basically, or complete stuff. these are things it's pretty hard to test for anyway. I think to your point, Magnus, people generally don't lie on applications. I think they also generally don't lie when you ask them directly if they're if they're closing, if they can. Are they people who start do you close more tasks, or do you start more tasks, or stuff like that? I feel people are in general trying to be trustworthy or truthy. But I think that's the real hard part, and I guess that's irrelevant of whether it's a specialist or a generalist. It's really hard to find. It's really hard, but it is certainly tough to find people who really contribute well to the team and can elevate their team members and are open to try new things if that's needed. So I think, in my opinion, I don't think there's a difference. I can see the top of the funnel, probably easier to write a quick summary, a job description for a specialist, because there's just like, I need these 5 tasks or 5 specialist areas. And then the matching is a lot easier, and you'll get a lot more hits if you define 20 skills and you just need a match on 15, and then you're good to go. So probably from a hiring perspective, there's a lot more to weed through for a generalist than for a specialist.
But I guess would theoretically be like a diversity problem, right? Because like you put in a ton of different skills, and I recall there was some research on like a male applicant will say, I can probably do 10 of these, I'll apply. Where the female will say, hey, man, I can only do 10 of these. It's not me. I'm not applying for this job. And then you're like, suddenly you don't get the diverse organization you might want. You suddenly just get the people saying, I can do like 75% of this, I'm gonna apply, right? So I think that's a different problem that we haven't talked about, at least in the generalist role, right? That how do you actually get that diversity in there where you put a lot of skills in there? And I guess, as Rosa said, that it might be like how you define the application, right? Not necessarily putting in like hard skill levels, but more describing your role more than like that, right? But I also think, like, is there actually something like entry-level specialist, right? If we don't look at like hardcore machine learning and all these, but like in the general computer science discipline, is there something like a entry-level specialist? Because I guess you actually don't even know what you want to do if you're entry level. You just get in there and like get shoved in a certain directions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I remember when I was just graduated, willing to do just about anything that was done on a computer, anything related to programming, and it was great. And now, if I were to find like a job, I would be like, oh, I don't know, it's got to be a little bit more specific, kind of. So I don't know if entry level generalist probably is, in my opinion, just a very open, if you can probably ask in the interviews, I guess, if you are, you're open to do whatever task at hand, whatever, but then, I mean, which is kind of what the role then implies.
Yeah, but I think my point was like, I think like as you grow in seniority, you will probably become more and more special, right? You will find the things you enjoy more and more. Like when you're starting up your career, when you're like in the mid-level, you're more likely to say, okay, I'm young, I can switch specialty now, or whatever. Like you'll jump around trying things, where as you grow older, at least I that's my experience with like recruiting one who's been in the game for 25 years. They will have a very, very narrow focus, where someone who's been there for 5 years is probably more likely to like have a broader perspective and saying, oh, that's not a problem. I'll help with the front end, or I know some YAMLs for this Kubernetes stuff. I'll make it work. Like, whereas the other one is like, no. At least like also if I had people saying like been somewhere for 25 years doing Java or C# and like just writing what we're actually working in, like we were working Node, and like they came back to me saying, no, that's not even a programming language. Then they're very specialized. They're gonna do Java for the rest of their life. That's their thing, right? Probably not gonna do anything else.
But I think it also, yeah, like you said, it depends. Becca said earlier, it depends on the level. But and I also think like it's also how the company defines the levels. I was a part of making the engineering descriptors for when we developed the job architecture for Unity. And then, you know, we were very mindful of, you know, like the higher levels that you got, the expectation is that you are willing to, you know, talk to the team about what it is that you've learned, why you do the things that you do in the way that you do them, that you want to help educate others. And then it's also a lot about hiring kind of the right personality. Like when I hire, I focus a lot on the person. What do they do to charge? Like, how do they, you know, what motivates them? You know, like, are they willing to teach others? Are they curious? And even though I would find, you know, the greatest specialist in the world, if that person is an asshole, I won't hire them. And you know, the people that come back and say, no, I don't want to do this. This is not even a programming language. And then it's about like, well, it is needed for that part of the product that we have. So we need to respect that and what that team is doing. And I need you to connect with them so we can talk about the product like in an overall perspective, right? So I think, again, it comes so much to mindset for me as well.
Yeah, I think so many good points like raised there in everything that we covered. I think the main things that I took away from it, I think Rosa, your first point as well about how people can actually go about hiring a generalist is a really good one. In terms of if you actually make it more about the environment and the culture that people are working within and define it by that, as opposed to the hard skills that people need, it's probably quite easy to do actually, in hindsight. But I think the other kind of, I guess, probably final point looking at time that I wanted to kind of ask about, and I know this could open a huge rabbit hole that could be never ending, but we've got to talk about AI in all of this as well. Do you think that that's going to generally make people move more towards being a generalist when there's so many different areas now, more than ever? I mean, it's always the case within tech that there's new frameworks and tools being released every single day, but now that it's a lot easier to pick things up to a basic level, do you think that people in general will become more of a generalist, or is that not something that AI will affect?
Well, I think the way I experience it here is that we have a company with pretty much 50% electrical engineers and 50% computer scientists. So it's basically 50-50. And you know, I now have electrical engineers raising PRs for code to fix issues in the distributed computing side of things, which I'm not saying they're not smart people. They certainly could have done this on their own, but this is not something I saw a year ago. So this is certainly new. So for me, it feels like the floor of the experts has been kind of raised quite a bit, and they're now able to contribute on new levels on par for some things which they just probably weren't too competitive in before. So the need for like generalists has certainly changed here, since we still need it though, but you know, we need someone who then vets all these things, but now we have it's definitely changes the ball game.
I'm a bit curious because, you know, Jamie's question kind of like, will there be more generalists, or like, you know, I think for me, a specialist will always be a specialist at heart, because they just love that particular thing that they love doing, but AI just enables them to do a lot more. So I think, you know, they're a specialist in their heart, but with AI, they can do a lot more and act more as a generalist. So I don't think kind of the definition between a specialist or a generalist will necessarily change. It's just a tool and toolkit that allows you to work a lot, you know, more broadly.
I think it's a mindset thing, right? I think the special will always be specialist. That's kind of what they do. That's their thing. But if you have like a generous mindset, like you will have a lower barrier of entry to say, okay, I'm not going to wait for this team they have different priorities and I can have some learning and help to actually fix this issue, then I'll do it. And I think like for Tobias, is it also the other way around? Like the software engineers are using AI to help the mechanical engineers, or like
I do.
theoretically would be.
I do, for instance. It's, you know, me and others who are, more platform side, able to speak the language of specialists in a way, because, I don't know that all companies are quite as split as we are in that sense, simply because we have a pretty niche product that we need PhDs in one area and then some generalists. So we have like this sort of language barrier in some sorts, and now it's a way to understand what's going on, and so it kind of goes the other way as well. We haven't seen it quite as much yet, but I'm sure it will happen, because it's you can certainly be dangerous in new areas now.
Yeah.
But I think AI will also create a lot of jobs. AI will create new specialist jobs and new generalist jobs.
Yeah, and I think as well, like as you were all talking about it, then in my mind as well, it might actually just make the specialists even more specialist. I mean, if they've spent their kind of career so far dedicated to one or two particular areas, it might actually just give them an easier way to kind of invest more time into that and really deepen their knowledge on that one particular area as well. So I guess it could go either way. Henrik, Becca, have you got anything else to kind of add to those points that have been covered already?
No, I guess it depends on whether you're a specialist by choice or not. But because if you are a specialist by choice, and I guess these are the people that we're talking about, even though you have the skills sort of amplified by AI, you wouldn't branch out any more than you would before.
Makes sense.
Just to piggyback on Magnus, this team is, 6 months backlog. I can just get a little help and kind of inner source. I can see that quite a bit in actually some of the teams that I'm managing right now. And so they might not know the full tech, but they'll use AI to help out so they can move faster. But they still like their specialties of front end, back end.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, that I think everyone's kind of alluded to it. A specialist will always be a specialist to some extent, but I mean, I think mostly, in my mind at least, it's a good thing if people are able to pick up a few other things. I think if they're maybe taking charge on something they don't really understand, that could be a little bit of a disaster. But that's where I guess all of you come in to help with the leadership side of things. I'm just conscious of time. I know we've covered kind of the bulk of the points, but is there any other points or kind of topics that people wanted to raise while we've got a couple of minutes left at all?
There was one question that we actually kind of didn't touch on, and that was, can you have specialists and generalists work alongside each other? And I think that's a fascinating topic, because sometimes back-end engineers that are specialists kind of like, oh, if you're doing full stack, you're not really an engineer, and you get these kind of comments. I'm like, yes, the person is a good engineer. They just look like at the whole stack. So I think that's a really interesting topic that requires a lot of, like, at least has for me, like, work around culture, like creating open, transparent, environments, where we talk about being respectful and how to work together and things like that. But I was curious about, like, some of the others here, like in the roundtable, their thoughts on that topic.
But I don't think, like, necessarily it's a specialist against specialist, right? It doesn't, like, you will have the back end and say, but that's front end, but they don't even know the complexity of the front end stack right now. They just sit thinking they're doing the world's most advanced system here in the back end, and the front end will say, but you're just doing RESTful APIs, like, what the fuck? So I think it's also like you will have specialties clashing, right? Whereas if you have you have the full stack and whatever, like, domain expert in a vertical, like if it's electrical engineering or machine learning, like, they'll probably match, because they kind of know, I don't know shit about what you're doing and I don't know shit about what you're doing. We need to collaborate, right? We need to figure out how do we interface with each other to make this work. Whereas, like, you'll have, when we get into the classical computer science discipline, you'll have battles, right? Someone will say, no, we'll do that on the front end. And the back end will say, no, we'll do this on the back end. And, like, there's probably not right and wrong, but they will at least spend days arguing about it, and not just whoever takes the tickets win it. They'll do the argument first, right? And I think that's also the challenge, right? We will have people saying, no, like the front end is on vacation. Sadly, we can't fix this issue because he's not here, and I'm not gonna touch that thing there. Even with the AI that can say, "Hey, it's this one." You need to make it. It's a true thing, not a true false statement here. I don't know if that answers the question. I think that's at least what I've experienced. Is it's not the. It's when specialties are clashing, right? Not necessarily when at least if they're supporting each other, it's not a problem. Like,
I think it's like a good team is having people who are different and also accepting each other's differences and just while there's certainly some almost religious battles in what you guys have already mentioned that I won't go into, but still, it's having just a team with different people. I think that's very valuable in itself, basically, because no single person can, carry it all, and we gotta have a little bit of everything, and not both some generalists in case the front end is on vacation, or someone who, and someone who's an expert in how the front end should look and why and all of that stuff. We kind of need everything to make the day-to-day work. I feel I guess sometimes it's a little there can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes if you have in terms of management responsibilities, and if you have deep very focused specialist with a manager that they don't understand because they aren't to the same level as they are in terms of the expertise. I think that's can happen, I guess, but I think apart from some of that struggle, I think it's very, very valuable to have a little bit of everything.
I think that's actually an interesting thing, right? That most of the time I will have someone on team who's a lot more clever than I, and I don't want to battle that one out because I don't need to be as clever. But sometimes there can be some competition in this. Like, you need to challenge your manager or who's around you with how awesome your skill sets are, and like, that's cool. But I think it can also become very tedious, like that, having that specialist who really needs to show off the specialties or like the deep knowledge in whatever stack they're in, like. And I guess it comes back to some of the things we've touched on, like on it doesn't matter what you can do if you're not a team player or the right match for the team, right? It will just become a battle, right? Instead of whatever, like front end, back end, doesn't matter.
The technique I usually do for kind of getting some of that empathy of, front end, back end fight, I have the team pair, and that humbles people quite quickly, and they actually also learn something. And it's not a full on pairing all the time, but it's like a wake up call and be like, oh, the front end can be complicated, oh, the back end can be complicated, and in all those little in between places that kind of get forgotten. So it's kind of a fun thing to see, especially with like, I don't know front end very well. I should not. Well, I started out as a front end. I should not be doing front end. But my front end does kind of like poke on me as well. And it can humble him quite quickly when thrown in with the back end. So
there's this small quote I heard once. It's like, if you think something's simple, it's because you don't understand it. And certainly true for the front end.
Just like easy is a 4-letter word.
So Henrik, are you going to jump in there as well?
No, I was going to say that I totally agree, Becca. That's a good point. If you have someone that is, if you have a team member that is not respectful of other people with different professional background, it's a cultural problem, and hence it's a leadership problem that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and again, that then comes down to the hiring side of things. But I mean, that is a rabbit hole we could go down for a long, long time. So I do think it's probably best if we get wrapped up there. But I do really, really appreciate everybody taking the time to come along today. I've learned a hell of a lot. I hope everyone here has taken something away from it as well. And like I say, I really appreciate everyone sharing their knowledge and taking the time out of the day to attend. So yeah, thank you all very much, and hopefully I'll speak to you all very soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great
No
day
problem.
and
See
have
you all
a
later.
great summer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
likewise.
have a good summer.
Have a great one. See you
Bye.
later.
Bye.
Bye.